February 1991, and Sergeant Slaughter tops the Push Me poll for the first and only month. Welcome to the monthly Pro Wrestling Push Me poll, an objective data-based ranking of pro wrestlers by how heavily they were being pushed month on month. And at the end of the video, I'll update the rolling PMP50 of the most pushed wrestlers of the previous 12 months. The PMP is not based on match quality, nostalgic name value, it's a real-time spotlight of who promoters were placing in the biggest spots at the time. It's the most objective way I've found to gauge success across the business. Wrestlers earn push points for main events, titles held and wrestled for, and appearances on big shows, all weighted by how big the respective companies they were working for at the time were. So, for February 91, Sergeant Slaughter was the shock new WWF World Champion after beating the Ultimate Warrior last month at the Royal Rumble, and sits at number 1 for the first time ever. Slaughter started the month by retaining over Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who makes number 5, with a cheap disqualification loss on the Main Event TV special on NBC, a show which also saw Royal Rumble winner Hulk Hogan officially named by President Jack Tunney as the number 1 contender against Slaughter for WrestleMania 7 next month. Hogan, who makes number 2 for February, bizarrely closed the Main Event special by leading the crowd in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance and waving Old Glory. You certainly couldn't accuse the WWF and Hulk Hogan of not leaning into the patriotism of the ongoing Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, at this time. But behind the scenes, all was not well. In addition to the slack the WWF was catching from the mainstream media for running the Sergeant Slaughter angle while American troops were losing their lives in the Gulf, the venue for WrestleMania 7 quietly changed. Instead of the 100,000 Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, which they were hoping would host one of the biggest wrestling events of all time, the Mania venue was moved into the way smaller capacity Los Angeles Sports Arena. This was not a good sign that the company had chosen a good direction for their current creative. Security concerns were cited for that. Sergeant Slaughter was actually wearing a bulletproof vest during matches, such was the anger against his anti-American shtick. But they were also just not selling tickets like they thought they would. Elsewhere, while Slaughter Hogan was now being pushed as the main event for WrestleMania 7, former champion The Ultimate Warrior, dropping to number 4, was receiving house show matches against Slaughter while building towards his own big WrestleMania showdown, a career versus career match against the man who cost him the belt, Macho King Randy Savage. Warrior Savage was arguably just as big a match as Slaughter Hogan at the top of the card, but the build to it was stymied by the fact Savage broke his thumb shortly after the big angle at the Royal Rumble, severely limiting what he could now do prior to Mania. The WWF were not having good luck leading into their big show. In addition to building towards the Slaughter match, Hogan also continued to battle against Earthquake, number 6 for February, in front of big houses too, often in stretcher matches, with Hogan now the definitive victor in that series. Hogan also teamed with his big buddy Tugboat to beat Earthquake and Dino Bravo in a tag match on the Main Event TV special. The Legion of Doom at number 10, Hawk and Animal, were still being pushed very strongly in the tag team ranks, beating the new version of the Orient Express, Tanaka and Kato, at the main event. And bubbling under the top 10 for the WWF this month, the Hart Foundation remained tag team champions, Mr. Perfect remained Intercontinental Champion, with the former IC champion Texas Tornado being kept strong too, and Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase was on a collision course on the heel side against his longtime bodyguard Virgil for WrestleMania 7 after Virgil turned face last month. For WCW, Ric Flair bedded back in as NWA/WCW World Champion and makes number 3 for this month, leading his Four Horsemen team of Sid Vicious, who makes number 7, Barry Windham and Larry Zbyszko subbing for an injured TV champion Arn Anderson in the superb War Games cage match main event of the Wrestle War 91 pay-per-view, which was the best big show they'd put on since last year's Wrestle War, over the team of Sting, US Tag Team Champions, the Steiner Brothers, and Flying Brian Pillman. This was a war, and easily my match of the month for February, so I'll just pause on it for a moment. Flying Brian, with an injured / taped up shoulder from a horseman attack, hot-headedly opts to start against Windham, and Pillman, who new Booker Dusty Rhodes was really high on, is a house of fire and quickly bloodies Windham. The horsemen win the coin toss though, obviously, and world champion Flair's in next, targeting Pillman's shoulder. Sting's in next, and boy is he still over. Actually even more over since dropping the title back to Flair last month. Veteran Larry Zbyszko follows for the heels. Larry had been AWA world champion the last couple of years as that once mighty company circled the drain and went down the tubes, but he was in WCW now, and a decent sub for Arn, who's at ringside for the Horsemen. The combo of Arn and Windham actually make number 8 for the month, even though Arn missed the big pay-per-view match. He still racked up more TV points than Zbyszko, who was only announced as being a sub on the pay-per-view itself. Back to the match. So Rick Steiner evens the sides and bloodies Flair on the cage wall. Sid's in, and then finally Scott Steiner as the match beyond begins. The crowd heat for this is insane, and as ever I'll put a link to it in the video description, and I would urge anyone who's never watched this match to seek it out. Towards the end, and Sid finally rips the bandages off Pillman's shoulder, Sting rallies by press slamming Flair off the low cage roof. That will come into play, because Sid then powerbombs Pillman twice, legitimately hurting him, and he's out in storyline and real life. Arn Anderson screams, "Ask him" at ringside, but Pillman can't respond, and his big buddy El Gigante runs out and calls the match off, carrying Pillman to the back. So the Horsemen win in what turned out to be the last big hurrah of this incarnation of them, and this is just a fantastic violent war of a match. El Gigante himself makes number 9 for February and was actually improbably being positioned as Ric Flair's next challenger for the WCW title, despite being nowhere near ready or competent enough for that spot, going to a DQ finish against Flair at the Omni. Flair was also set to face New Japan's Tatsumi Fujinami next month at the Tokyo Dome, as WCW and New Japan were forging a new working relationship. WCW actually had working relationships with both major Japanese companies at this time, in sharp contrast to 12 months ago, when it was the WWF courting both big Japanese promotions. And elsewhere at Wrestle War, New Japan's IWGP champion Big Van Vader went to a wild no contest against All Japan's Stan Hansen. This was their third major encounter between Vader and Hansen, and all eyeballs remained intact this time, but it was still stiff as hell. And elsewhere in the card, All Japan's Danny Spivey challenged Lex Luger for the US title in a decent match at Wrestle War as well. Outside of this month's top 10, New Japan native stars Tatsumi Fujinami and Riki Choshu continued to be pushed strongly, while IWGP champion Vader was showcasing himself in the US, with Tiger Jeet Sin sticking around as a top heel too. In All Japan, Jumbo Tsuruta bedded back in as the Triple Crown champion, and World Tag Team Champions, the Miracle Violence Connection, Steve Williams and Terry Gordy, were being pushed strong too. In Memphis, Jerry Lawler remained the USWA's top star, while the nominal USWA champion Terry Funk was still perplexingly absent. Lawler winning the USWA tag team titles from the Fabulous Ones alongside Jeff Jarrett. As I mentioned last month, the USWA were back running the Dallas territory without the Von Erichs this time, as well as Memphis, with Eric Embry returning and reigning as the Texas heavyweight champion once again. And finally, in Mexico, EMLL returned to Arena Mexico for another season of larger shows, where newcomer Conan was getting a big push, taking a significant singles win over Perro Aguayo. Right, so how does all this affect the rolling PMP50? As a reminder, the PMP50 updates on a rolling month-by-month basis, similar to rolling tennis rankings. So we subtract the push scores for February 1990 and add the scores for February 91 to cover the 12-month period of March 1990 to February 1991. So our top 5 for the PMP50 stays the same as last month. Ultimate Warrior still Wrestler of the Year, with Hogan, Savage, Hansen and Sting numbers 2 to 5. Ric Flair moves back up a spot to 6, swapping with Mr. Perfect, while Sergeant Slaughter's a big mover, climbing 10 spots to enter the top 10 at 8. Earthquake, Jumbo, DiBiase, Demolition, Choshu, WWF Tag Team Champions The Hart Foundation move up a further couple of spots to 14. All Japan Tag Team Champions Williams and Gordy are back up to 18, and the Legion of Doom and Hacksaw Jim Duggan both move up to 19 and 20, respectively, as a result of being featured prominently in February. Jake Roberts bumps back up to 24, leading into his big blindfold match against Rick Martel at WrestleMania 7. For WCW, the Horseman combo of Arn Anderson and Barry Windham move up to 29, and Sid Vicious moves up a whopping 9 places to 32, having headlined and won War Games. The WWF's Greg the Hammer Valentine re-debuts as a singles wrestler at 31 in the 50. Much as I did with Saito and Hashimoto in New Japan last month, I've broken up Rhythm and Blues as a tag team for this month, but for different reasons. Although they were a tag team for the majority of the last 12 months, Honky Tonk Man and Valentine had at this point had a definitive split, with Honky leaving the WWF and Valentine being turned face for actually I think the first time in his WWF career, and going back to his natural blonde hair again. So Honky drops out of the PMP entirely this month, and Valentine jumps up to 31 as the result of getting a decent renewed singles push as a good guy, including a very credible long run in last month's Royal Rumble. Tugboat also moves back up to 35 as a benefit of still regularly tagging with Hogan and getting that rub. 2 new entries into the PMP50 this month, as New Japan veteran Tatsumi Fujinami returns from injury at 44, and weirdly the Orient Express have accrued enough points to debut at 49, but it's the old version of the Orient Express, Tanaka and Sato, who have enough points in combo to make the list, as the new combo of Tanaka and Kato don't have enough combined points to make the cut. So, as well as Honky Tonk Man leaving us this month, we also say goodbye to veteran legends Antonio Inoki and Andre the Giant. All of this keeps us with the WWF occupying 28 of the 50 spots, WCW and New Japan with 7 spots each, All Japan with 6, and 1 apiece for the USWA and Mexico's EMLL. So join me next time for March 1991 and how the 2 huge shows that month, WrestleMania 7 and the WCW New Japan Super Show at Tokyo Dome, affect the overarching PMP50. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave any comments below, and keep watching as we move through 1991, looking at who was pushed hardest and where. Cheers!